What's up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. We are in the wake of the 2025 NFL Draft. Coach, what's going on?
We're all sorting through the dust settling and all, and I was just talking to Jeff off camera before the show. He put in about 100 hours of work, I think, this weekend. So hopefully Jeff will be all here today for the whip around.
You know, we're going to make we always talk about, and a lot of times Coach will just give me the 5 topics he wants to discuss, and that's fine with me. I'm cool with whatever he wants to roll with, and he gives them to me in order. I'm changing up the order. Number 5 is going to be number 1 because I want to talk about this guy and I want to be done with it.
Okay,
And it's Shedeur Sanders, because Shedeur Sanders, we knew he was polarizing before this draft even started. You talked about it from the combine. Like, once he stepped up to the podium, it was like a different aura around him compared to other players. It really made me sick in a lot of ways. And I will even say that in one way. Let me say this first. The kids that prank called these players, that makes me sick to my stomach. And everyone's like, oh, they're these frat guys from Ole Miss. I was in a fraternity. I never would have done that to someone who's about to enter a new echelon of their life and mess with that. That's just messed up to me. But let's talk about, what was your take on the debacle spectacle that was Shedeur Sanders and his journey throughout this draft process?
So I did a whole episode on this on my Call Sheet podcast on Monday, and I titled the podcast, the Shedeur Sanders drama is really about life in contemporary America. There are so many things going on here, from the power that these young men have in college, and for some of them, the sense of, I think, entitlement that gives them, and then transitioning to the NFL, where you have no power, where you are essentially conscripted to a team for the next 4 or 5 or even 6 years, and they're going to expect you to fit into what they do. And the transition between those two worlds for Shedeur Sanders obviously didn't seem to go very well. And I think ultimately what it really came down to was that the NFL evaluators did not believe he was a starting quarterback, at least not right out of the gate. And the last thing that you want is your backup to be, soaking up all the air in the room, so to speak. They didn't believe he was worth the attention, the headaches, the noise that was going to come with him if he wasn't going to be the franchise guy. And I think that's where the national media got it wrong. Everybody in the national media over-evaluated him as compared to the evaluations of the NFL people.
And it's not to suggest that he's not talented.
Nope.
No one is saying that.
Nope.
But at the same time, the teams that are making these 4-year investments on these players, sometimes 5 if it's a first-round pick, they have to weigh talent versus other stuff. And when you tip those scales, which way does it go? And I think a lot of people viewed him as the other stuff is really outweighing the talent. And you talked about his limitations with his athleticism or lack thereof, lack of mobility, the ability to read the field. He holds onto the football too long. These are glaring issues. And they've been talked about ad nauseum, but for some reason, maybe it's his father, which is my follow-up question to you, Coach. How much of the decision from the NFL teams and the other stuff that I mentioned had to do with Deion Sanders and not so much Shedeur?
I think there was some of that. Honestly, when I was listening to some of these stories about Deion's involvement, I was thinking to myself, this is stuff I deal with as a high school coach, where the parents live in the same town, where as you're coaching, not something NFL coaches are used to dealing with, nor do they want to deal with. So I think that was a turnoff in some regards. I think his lack of preparation for some of the draft process, the top 30 visits, etc., was an even bigger turnoff. That they thought to themselves, if this guy can't get himself prepared for a job interview, the most important one of his life, what's it going to be like when he gets the money and he gets all the other stuff that's going to come with this? And then now you're already hearing stories. And again, I'm not going to swear I know that any of this is true. We're all hearing this secondhand, but you're already hearing stories about how Deion Sanders wants to be included on some of the initial meetings between the Cleveland Browns and Shedeur Sanders. I think a lot of those teams just said, I'm not having that. He's not worth it from a film perspective.
I know that there was a lot of talk about you brought up the meetings, the visits, pre-draft visits, and the visit supposedly with the Giants and Brian Daboll went awful.
Yep.
And a lot of people, I didn't realize this, they went back because the Giants were the team that they did the off-season hard knocks with them last year. And so Brian Daboll, they showed him grilling Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and they're on the whiteboard. And he's like, okay, change this, this, and this. And you got to think quick. You got to be able to adjust quickly. I heard, this is again, secondhand, fact or fiction, I don't know. This is just out there, that Shedeur Sanders was like a deer in the headlights during this time. If you're a coach and you're telling a guy to diagram stuff and change it, okay, if this happens, we're making this call, give me what the call is, and they're struggling, are you thinking, okay, maybe this isn't what he's used to, or is that a glaring red flag? We need to move him down our board immediately.
If you're considering drafting him with the 3rd overall pick, that's a huge red flag.
Right.
If you're thinking about maybe taking him in the 3rd round, where you're like, hey, he's going to need some time to develop, or the 4th round, oh, I'm probably okay with that. I think what makes it even more problematic, and again, I want to caveat this by saying we're hearing this secondhand,
yes,
but supposedly the Giants sent him an install and said, hey, we're going to talk about this in the interview. So basically they gave him a homework assignment, study this, and then come in and let's talk through it. And he was not prepared. So again, that you're failing the assignment. And if you want to be taken 3rd overall, or even in the 1st round anywhere, you can't fail that assignment, right? If you do, you can't expect your draft stock to hold.
No. So let's now transition from just Shedeur to the Browns. And we'll talk about the Browns and the trade that was made with the Jaguars here in a little bit. What in the hell are they doing? So you take Dylan Gabriel, 3rd round, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you double up on a quarterback and get Shedeur Sanders in the 6th round, or was it 5th? I can't remember. I think it was the 5th round when he was selected. I don't make it make sense, coach. I just don't understand the process. We can nitpick these players all we want. I don't understand the process. Why would they make that selection after drafting Dylan Gabriel in round 3?
I'll say this about Dylan Gabriel. You know that I've had a good opportunity to get to know Kevin Stefanski. In our conversations, I can tell you this. He greatly values accuracy and processing in quarterbacks. And Dylan Gabriel is one of the most accurate quarterbacks in this draft. I don't know about his processing skills, but I'm assuming that the Browns value them highly. So I can understand why they would be attracted to Dylan Gabriel. I don't know anything about what happened with Shedeur Sanders. If you're just reading the tea leaves of the reactions that you saw, the video clips, it sure feels like the owner, who, by the way, has a connection to Deion Sanders, the quarterbacks coach in Cleveland, Bill Musgrave, played with Deion Sanders as a teammate of his with the Dallas Cowboys. It kind of feels like maybe the owner, I don't want to say made them make that pick, but otherwise it doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense.
Not at all. That's the thing for me. I look at this, I'm like, man, I just don't, none of this makes sense, because if you valued Shedeur Sanders at all, you would have taken him in the 3rd round over Dylan Gabriel. Okay, so you take Dylan Gabriel, that's fine. You mentioned all the assets that he has that Kevin Stefanski wants. But then to say in the 5th round, we're going to take another quarterback who's going to bring a lot of drama with him. Now they have 5 quarterbacks on their depth chart, including Deshaun Watson. I know some Browns fans are ecstatic thinking they won the draft. I couldn't disagree more. I just think that this was a giant fumble. And like you said, you watched Andrew Berry and he was just stone-faced making the pick. They weren't excited. Kevin Stefanski doing a little yay clap. I mean,
you know what it looks like in those war rooms. It's like an audition to see which team can like self-congratulate the loudest, the most enthusiastically.
Right.
Everybody's high-fiving and chest bumping. All right, let's take a different angle real quick.
Sure.
Let's say that they really did look at the board and said, my God, we were actually thinking about taking this guy in the 1st round. And here he is in the 5th. And yes, I know we've already got now 3 quarterbacks, a 4th if you consider Deshaun Watson, but the value is just too good here. This is a potential 1st round talent who we can now get in the 5th round. Let's go get him and have a wide open quarterback competition and see what happens. Maybe that's how it went down.
Maybe. I mean, we're 10 minutes into the show, coach, and I still have so many questions about this whole scenario from the draft process to everything. It's crazy. But let me finish this up. We don't want to spend the entire, I wanted to talk about it now so we didn't have to talk about it later. How do you see this playing out in Cleveland?
I think Joe Flacco will be the starter this year because I don't think Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, or Shedeur Sanders will beat out Joe Flacco. I think that if you're Kevin Stefanski, you recognize that Joe Flacco unquestionably gives you the best chance to win right now. Kevin Stefanski's won games with Joe Flacco. And then behind him, I think it's a three-way competition to see who becomes the backup and potential heir apparent. I have no idea how that will play out. Kenny Pickett certainly has an edge over the other two because he's already played in the NFL for a couple of seasons. So my suspicion is Cleveland's depth chart at the beginning of the season looks like this: Flacco 1, Pickett 2, and whoever then wins the preseason competition between Shedeur and Dylan Gabriel 3. And honestly, if one of those guys is not going to make it, you can't keep him as like a practice squad guy. Can you imagine Shedeur Sanders as a practice squad guy? You got to cut him.
Yeah. And that's why there's been already some people thinking that Kenny Pickett's going to be the odd man out.
Maybe.
And that they're going to cut him.
He might be.
That they'll keep Gabriel and Sanders on the active roster. And then they'll say, we're going to have what a fumbled up mess. The optics are horrible. Everything about that situation was horrible. And again, we're left saying only Cleveland. But let's move on. Let's go to just general draft talk. Give me one or two picks in this draft that you really liked and why. I'll let you start.
Now, there's a bunch of them I really liked. One that jumps out to me is Tyler Warren, 14th overall to the Indianapolis Colts, because I think he is potentially one of the most versatile and impactful players in this rookie class. He is a mismatch waiting to happen at 6'6" and 260 pounds, but a guy who runs routes like a receiver, and he's tough and physical. He can block, so you can put his hand down in the dirt, and then you can move him around the formation. I like that. I like Ashton Genty to the Raiders. You and I talked about this last week. I thought that was a great landing spot for him, just given the fact that Chip Kelly really knows how to maximize his use of running backs, and Pete Carroll loves a good power run game. And I love the Carter kid out of Penn State, to Abdul Carter to the Giants at number 3, because I think he's a perfect fit for their scheme. So those are 3-round picks. I love the Steelers pick, but I won't talk about the Steelers because I know you want to.
Well, I actually wasn't. The pick that made me kind of sick to my stomach, and it's because of the rivalry between the Steelers and the Ravens, was them getting Mike Green. Now, Mike Green does have some off-field issues, and I don't know if that's going to transition into the league or anything like that. He is a very talented individual, and the fact that he's going to be wearing purple and black, I did not like that, because I think he's a really good player. They don't have that edge presence as they once did when Terrell Suggs was there, and I'm not saying he is going to be that type of presence, but that kind of made me sick. I thought the Malachi Starks pick for the Ravens in the first round was also really good. Pairing him with Kyle Hamilton is going to be a very, very good duo for them. Other than that, I did love the Steelers selection at Derek Hartman in the first round. It's not sexy. It's not flashy. It's what they needed, though. A team that got gashed by the run, 299 yards in the playoff loss to the Ravens in the wildcard round last year. You went out and get your guy. Coach, do you want to talk about Derek Hartman at all, or Mike Green for that?
Well, yeah, Derek Hartman, and it's not just that they got a defensive tackle, it's that they got the right guy, that he's the right scheme fit. I mean, he's a penetrator, and that's what the Steelers are really asking their guys to do now up front. I mean, he gets off the ball, and you watch him with the way he uses his hands and the leverage he plays with, and it reminds you of Cam Hayward. And he's not there, but stylistically, it reminds you of Cam Hayward, and now he's going to get mentored by Cam Hayward. So I think that's tremendous. I think with Green, the big issue for him will be, obviously, can he make the adjustment both on and off the field? He's coming from Marshall. I mean, when Marshall played Ohio State, he was great. I mean, he's going up against NFL dudes, and he looked great. But it'll be interesting to see if he can do that on a consistent basis. And then how will he handle the off-field stuff?
It's funny. I was in the gym this morning, and I saw a guy who's a Ravens fan, and he was talking to me about, and I'd known him for years. He goes, "What do you think about that pick? What did that Green guy?" I said, "Well, He was at Marshall for a reason. He said, what do you mean? I said, why was Randy Moss at Marshall? Because he messed up with Notre Dame. He messed up with Florida State, and Marshall was the only team that would take him. I said, I'm not saying that Mike Green's going to be lousy. There have been Marshall players that have made it into the league. Chad Pennington, Byron Leftwich, and a few. Randy Moss, the most famous. But I said, if he can get his head on straight, he could be really, really good for a really long time. So I really like that pick. Let's go to the next one. Give me one or two picks that made you scratch your head.
Well, I think that you have to. I'm not questioning the Giants trading it back into the first round to take Jackson Dart because they obviously needed a quarterback. They obviously felt like somebody was going to take him before they got him, probably the Rams at 26. I think the Rams are really good. I think you have pretty good evidence the Rams are going to take him because they immediately traded out of the 26 spot, or they were probably like, well, what the hell? No, all right, now we got to figure out plan B. But I think that they need to be sure that that they'll get the opportunity to coach up Jackson Dart. I mean, they are going to have to win now. Brian Dable, I don't know what his leash is, but there was talk that he might get fired last season. And now they go into this season with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston as their quarterbacks. And you got to win with those guys because Jackson Dart's not going to be your starter this year. So they moved an important asset to trade up for a guy who's probably not going to be their quarterback for at least a year, at least. And it's just interesting to me, like, will Brian Dable get to see that through? And that if the Giants win 4 or 5 games again, I'd bet he's gone.
Now, I don't know. Speaking of Dart, I want to ask you this question. Have you seen any of John Gruden's quarterback camp stuff on Twitter or social media?
Yeah.
Did you watch the Jackson Dart one?
Yes.
Did you come away thinking this guy's NFL ready after that?
Well, it was interesting because I was looking at what they were going through, and it was stuff that I could teach to our high school kids.
Right. Yeah.
And that felt a little elementary to me. So from that perspective, and that is one of the criticisms of the system they ran at Ole Miss, that while it was very effective, it was also really QB friendly, and but in a way that's almost detrimental to the NFL. It's going to get a lot more complicated at the next level for him.
When he was doing, it was funny when John Gruden's like, give me your cadence. And he just claps. He's like, okay, well, what if there's an audible? And he like claps twice. He goes, I can't do this. It's just,
well, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? That tells you that Jackson Dart is not the guy making those calls. Lane Kiffin is sending that stuff in. And in the NFL, you're going to have to be able to do that yourself. The biggest thing you got to do in the NFL, I think people all think about audibles and they always say, oh, you're changing the play. No, the biggest thing you're doing as a quarterback is you're changing the protection. If you can't recognize the blitz coming and you can't be able on your own to walk up and change the protection, either to slide the line a different way or bring a back into the backfield to help you protect, et cetera, you're going to get your brains beaten in. And I question whether or not he's there yet.
All right. So picks that made me shake my head or just, I don't know, made me like, okay, first thing was the Carolina Panthers taking Ted McMillan at 8 was surprising. I knew he's a good receiver. He's tall, he's an athletic freak, but at 8, like that was a surprise for me. It really, really was. And then the other one was the Saints getting Tyler Shuck early in the second. And while, yes, there's a lot of people that think he was maybe the most polished quarterback coming out in this draft, but the age and the injury history, I don't know, Coach. I just thought that it just didn't feel right. What are your takeaway on those two players?
I've watched a lot of Tyler Shuck, and my opinion on him is he is boom or bust. He has some crazy intangibles. I mean, he can make some throws off platform that are Patrick Mahomes-like, but he also makes some of the dumbest decisions of any quarterback I've seen in a while and can be absolutely careless and reckless with the football. So you're probably going to get kind of all of that from him, but I think his success will rely upon how much can he minimize the gunslinger mistakes and just play regular football, right? How much can he just do the simple things? They talk about, like, a lot of times with quarterbacks, you don't have to do the extraordinary stuff. You need to do the ordinary stuff extraordinarily well. And I don't know if he'll be able to do that.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. And this was not the best draft for quarterbacks. We knew that coming into it. And that's why the next talking point is going to be interesting for a lot of reasons. The question is the big trade, which saw the Jaguars move up and take the Browns' second overall draft pick. It sent Cleveland another first round pick in 2026. A lot of people said maybe that's the Browns are going to go up. 2026 is supposed to be that draft for the quarterbacks. And yet they draft two quarterbacks in this cycle. Who do you think won that trade between Jacksonville and Cleveland?
So it's interesting. I did my podcast today on the call sheet is with Ken Wisniewski, our CEO here and at Fans First. We're talking about value. What does value really mean in a draft? And we talked a lot about this trade. And Ken said, and I thought this was an interesting take. Ken's got a house down in the Jacksonville area. He spends a lot of time down there. He knows the Jaguars fan base pretty well. And he describes it as apathetic at best, that there is not a lot of interest or even juice in the Jaguars, that they have constantly are having ticket promotions where they're giving away tickets to their home games. And if you know, as a Steelers fan or Ken as an Eagles fan, you know, that's not a thing with many franchises. So his point was that getting Travis Hunter is as much about what he can do to juice up the fan base as it is about what he can do on the field, that they need a spark. They need something to generate greater interest in that franchise. And that this is a move that is designed to create some of that buzz. And that's interesting. And I get that.
Yeah, it is.
But does it justify, Jeff, does it justify moving another first round pick?
You could also say the Browns passing up on a generational talent, value a first round pick next year. So if you think Travis Hunter is a guy that could be a dynamic playmaker for over a decade for your team, how do you pass that up? But to go back to Jacksonville, I mean, this is an organization that they tarped the upper deck of their stadium. I mean, for how many years? Because they didn't just want empty seats showing on telecasts. Right. They voluntarily said, we'll give you 3 home games a year to go play overseas. I mean, think about, like you said, just the Pennsylvania teams, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Could you imagine them saying, yeah, we'll sacrifice 3 home games to go play over in London? No, there's no way they're doing that. Jacksonville's a different beast. I thought Ken brings a good perspective. For me, I look at it more in Cleveland. Jacksonville going up makes sense. I get why they did it. You have Trevor Lawrence, get him a really good playmaker like Travis Hunter. He's a dual threat guy. You want to play him on defense, sure, whatever. It's going to put butts in seats for sure. But for Cleveland, you pass on this guy. And so everyone's thinking, okay, they're just getting draft capital for next year and they're going to go get their quarterback next year. But then you take 2 quarterbacks later. And I know we already talked about that process. It didn't make sense. I thought Cleveland probably would have been better off taking Travis Hunter and then hoping to get a quarterback next year and then playing that game, kind of what the Steelers are doing, waiting for 2026, it seems, to find their next quarterback. What do you think about it from the Cleveland perspective?
I think picking up the first round pick next year is a big deal.
Yep.
Because I don't think Jacksonville is going to be great. And I think that that's going to wind up being a pretty good pick. But at the same time, you're right. There seems to be some mixed messaging with Cleveland's draft strategy that if you're going to say Joe Flacco's our starter, then you're kind of acknowledging that you're not winning big this year. That he is the proverbial bridge to whatever is next. And then you draft 2 quarterbacks and now it's like, well, is that what's next? Or is next year what's next? It just doesn't seem, it does seem like this, that the strategy they are exercising seems to suggest that Kevin Stefanski has some job security there, because these are not win now moves.
If I'm Kevin Stefanski, if that owner said you're taking Shedeur Sanders, no matter what, I'm telling him after this season, you can find a new coach. Like if you're forcing me to do this, like if this is the way that it just nothing adds up with not just Shedeur Sanders, the trade, the way they're lining things up. It just doesn't make sense. I shouldn't be surprised, yet I am. All right, let's go with the quarterbacks. Which quarterback will fit best with the team who drafted them? So let me read off the quarterbacks that were selected. In the first round, there were 2. Cam Ward, obviously the number 1 overall pick, goes to the Tennessee Titans. Then at pick 25, Jackson Dart goes to the Giants. We talked about Jackson Dart. Second round, only one quarterback is taken. Tyler Shuck goes to the Saints, and that's the 8th overall pick in that round. In the third round, Jalen Milroe is the next quarterback off the board, going to Seattle. Also in the third round, Dylan Gabriel goes to Cleveland. No quarterbacks in the fourth round. Fifth round, Shedeur Sanders is finally selected. He's the only quarterback taken in the fifth round. In the sixth round, there's a run on quarterbacks. Kyle McCord goes to Philly at 5th overall. Pittsburgh takes Will Howard, 9th overall. Riley Leonard goes to Indianapolis, 13th overall. And then Graham Mertz from Florida goes to the Texans, 21st overall. And Cam Miller of North Dakota State, he goes to the Raiders, 39th overall in the 6th round. 7th round, 2 quarterbacks are taken. Curtis Rourke of Indiana, he goes to San Francisco. And then Quinn Ewers, the final quarterback selected 7th round, to the Miami Dolphins. What do you think, Coach? There's a lot of players there.
Well, I get why the Giants are attracted to Jackson Dart, because I think he does some things that remind them, Brian Daboll anyway, of Josh Allen. Not on his level, obviously, but stylistically. I just don't know if Daboll is going to get a chance to coach him. I like Jalen Milroe's fit in Seattle because I think that they can find a way to package him early as essentially a running quarterback before he has the opportunity to try to compete for a starting job there. I really like Will Howard's fit in Pittsburgh. I think Will Howard is perfectly suited for the Arthur Smith offense. He is big, 6'5", 235. He'll stand in the pocket. He attacks the middle of the field pretty well in the passing game. He's mobile enough to be able to run some boot concepts. Yeah, Ohio State even used him on some design runs and short yardage. So he feels like a guy to me who's got an opportunity in Pittsburgh where he's not going to have to play right away. He's in a system that's suited well for his skill set, and he'll have some time to develop. So I won't be shocked if he's a legitimate competitor for their starting job a year from now.
Yeah, when you look at these teams that took quarterbacks, there's only a handful that will actually potentially see playing time this year even. Cam Ward, obviously. Tyler Shuck, depending on what Derek Carr is looking at. Jalen Milroe is probably not going to play, barring something happening up there in Seattle. Both Browns picks, no. This Kyle McCord in Philly, that's a backup role. You brought up Will Howard. Could be, depending on how if Aaron Rodgers is coming to Pittsburgh or not, which we don't know. Riley Leonard's probably not going to play. Graham Mertz, no. Cam Miller, no. Rourke, no. Yours, no. So in that regard, yeah, Will Howard, Tyler Shuck, Cam Ward, those are the 3 guys that I think have a legitimate shot of maybe seeing some playing time in 2025. And we'll see how it goes in terms of fit. Let me ask you this. This is just something curious. When I saw that the Eagles took Kyle McCord, the Steelers like Kyle McCord a lot too. Does that really jive with the Jalen Hurts? Like, this is something that I know that the Steelers, they talked about how they wanted to have a quarterback room that was very similar in skill set. I would have thought that, if let's say Jalen Milroe was still available, that would have been a better fit to back up Jalen Hurts, would it not, other than Kyle McCord?
Well, it's interesting because Philly's backup, their second string quarterback, Tanner McKee, who they like a lot, does have a much more similar skill set to Kyle McCord than either do to Jalen Hurts. So they don't seem to be bothered by having 2 quarterbacks who aren't necessarily interchangeable. And I think there are teams who feel as though they can have a backup who does a small thing, has a smaller package, but does it really, really well, than trying just to have him run the entire package that the starter might run. I mean, that in some ways is almost easier to prepare for by saying, hey, we got to play you, then here's our package of plays. And you're going to get really good at this package rather than us try to have you do everything Jalen Hurts does.
That's true. That's a good point. We'll see how that plays out in the quarterback situation across the league, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as training camp rolls on. But let's finish this up with a profile, and not a player profile. I've got some strong opinions about this man, but I'm going to let you talk about him first. That's Mr. Mel Kiper of ESPN, formerly of the Baltimore Sun. He is a Baltimore native. Go ahead, Coach. Talk about Mel Kiper.
Well, he's a Maryland guy, so I'll let you have the lion's share of this conversation. I will be succinct. I think that the NFL and football fans in general owe a debt of gratitude to Mel Kiper for being a pioneer in helping make the draft what it is today. I mean, he was in on this way before anybody else, and he was largely responsible for the draft becoming an event as opposed to just this thing that happened in the off season. So kudos to Mel Kiper for that.
Right.
That said, what he did this weekend was such an embarrassment and so selfish and self-serving to essentially argue that the entire NFL is wrong simply because they disagreed with him about Shedeur Sanders, and then to suck the air out of the room for so long, pounding that drum, that if I were ESPN, I would think long and hard about how much more I want to feature him moving forward.
See, that's the thing. You brought it up. You just said it perfectly. He was pounding the table not for Shedeur Sanders. It wasn't about the player. It was about that he had this player as what, 5th overall on his big board, and to watch him fall to round 5, it makes him look bad.
Right.
It gives him a bad reputation. Oh yeah, you're so good. The guy that you said is the 5th best player hasn't been selected on day 1 or day 2. And then he's starting to get, and it's prideful. I understand. Like you want to be the guy that is right. Most NFL draft people are wrong way more than they're right anyways. I think what really ticked me off, and I'll leave his home. I live in this state, but his home city out of it, but he's a Baltimorean, but still, I think that what made me the most upset, and I watched ESPN on day 1 and then I didn't watch it again because I just couldn't take it, was that he was constantly driving this back to that one point that is Shedeur Sanders falling every single time a player or quarterback or team that might need a quarterback was on the clock. And I think back to, I get Cam Ward. Okay. He got selected 1st overall to the Tennessee Titans. We all knew it doesn't matter. We should be celebrating this young man for being the 1st overall selection for the Tennessee Titans. And I hardly heard them talk about the young man.
Mm-hmm.
And all these other players. Ashton Genty goes, and it's always coming back to this. It's always coming back to this. I agree with you. If I'm ESPN, and trust me, they're reading the tea leaves differently than we are. They're looking at it and saying, man, everyone's talking about our coverage, and they were tuning in to see Mel Kiper freak out. We're going to keep Mel there. That's the way they're going to view it. But there has to be someone that has a little part of their brain in the recesses of their brain saying, man, this was a really bad look for our coverage. And you even saw people that were on the panel were getting pissed off.
Yeah.
And they're like, Mel, like, what are we talking about here? Like, you're saying that everyone's been wrong for the last 50 years. What are we saying? Like, come on. Yes, they've gotten it wrong before. And you can talk about, he went back to Johnny Unitas. Okay, you've lost me when you talk about the Steelers messing up Johnny Unitas. Okay, I get it. But still, I don't know, Coach. Any final thoughts on Mel Kiper?
Your point about Cam Ward is a really good one. There are so many young men that are having their NFL dream realized. They let him roll at one point for 9 straight minutes on this, and they blew through like 2 guys getting picked.
Yeah,
where they just got their name flashed at the bottom of the screen. They didn't do it. They didn't do anything, and that's a problem to me. And you mentioned pride, and you're right. Somebody ran something on Twitter that was just a reel of Mel Kiper being wrong over the years about lots of guys like Jamarcus Russell, who he called a generational talent. And, I don't remember who all of them were, but you are quarterback, especially. We don't know how these guys are going to translate. It is an inexact science. So it's fine to have your opinion, but to condemn the entire National Football League for it is such a selfish act. But unfortunately, you made a good point too. ESPN, we're talking about it, and because everybody's talking about it, it's a win for them.
I think you look at all the Jamarcus Russells, the Ryan Leafs. This guy's going to be the next franchise quarterback, and they fall off. That's a missed assessment, right? And just like the Tom Brady in the 6th round, that's a missed assessment. Someone passed up on that guy and let him fall to the 6th round when the Patriots drafted him to be Drew Bledsoe's backup. No one knew that he was going to be a 6-time Super Bowl champion, or however many times he's won it and been there a million times, and he's considered the greatest quarterback of all time. No one knew. It's a missed assessment, but that happens. Like that's part of the evaluation, and that's also why I hate draft grades. But maybe we'll talk about that on next week's show.
That is my, you know how much I love draft grades, right?
Well, maybe we'll do some grades
Oh,
next week then. Not on players. We'll make it unique. We'll do some grades. All right, Coach. Go ahead and plug the Call Sheet Daily, your podcast.
Yeah, I got a great week of shows. Today's show, like I said, Ken Wisniewski and I are talking about what value really means when it comes to the NFL draft. It's our Whiteboard Wednesday conversation tomorrow. Thursday, interesting. I have a journalist coming on here on Thursday. I'm gonna talk up South Jersey real quick. 14 players from South Jersey were taken in the NFL draft. Many of whom
did the Syracuse guy get drafted?
Yeah, he went to Jacksonville in the 7th round. I thought he would go higher, but many of those guys I coached against or I have a connection to, and a guy Mark Tribble, local journalist here, he's covered them all, and he's going to talk about the journal, covering these guys from, in many instances, when they were like 8th and 9th graders to now the NFL, and what's that's been like for him.
That's pretty cool. So check that out wherever you get your podcast. Search the Call Sheet Daily with Coach Kevin Smith or with Kevin Smith, and you'll find it. Awesome stuff, Coach. As always, thanks for your time. We'll see you next week on another NFL Whip Around. Take it easy.